Kei ko nei au me ki rā kia whaka tuwhire hea I tēnei te tatau mo enei ngā manuhiri e noho kei wainui a tata. Mine is the role and the privilege to open the doors, metaphorically speaking, to say welcome. Hoi ana ko tāku e tūnei te mihi ki enei me ki rā te tira, rangatira, e tai kei wainui a tātai. Kei runga I tēnei o ngā ki, so acknowledging each of you in terms of the kaupapa and this paper before us at Council. There's a wonderful little kōrero that talks about the seasons, and in particular matariki. And it talks about if we acknowledge these and we look to nurture and amongst the balancing of everything we wish to achieve, then so it goes, ka puna kai, ka puna tangata, ka ora te tehi mea, ka ora te tehi mea, which means there will be abundance of food and therefore the prosperity of people in terms of a world and a legacy we leave for those coming after us. Hoi ana ko tāku e tū, kei runga te kupu o tēnei te tiamana e mihi rā ki o koutou. Hoki mai tāku mihi ki a koe Tom. And to acknowledge Tom from a previous triennium, this is not a new audience for you, but to mihi to you and in particular the kaupapa. Mō reira tēnei te mihi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, huri mai tēnā tātou. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bertie. And on behalf of the Council, staff and councillors, I want to really give you a warm welcome to our forum. This was a dream that Tom had a long time, many years ago. And so it's a realisation of a dream. And we know that you've gone away and you've done a whole lot of work, and we're looking forward to hearing what you've done and what you intend to do and your direction for the future. Because it's incredibly important, the work you're going to do. We know we've got a lot of things wrong in our society, and we know that a lot of the ways that we're farming, whether it be as horticulturalists or as pastoral farmers or as ground croppers, that we're not getting it as right as we should do. So we are looking for some vision and looking for you some thoughts from you on how you're working with the community, how you're making change as we go forward, because we know that a lot of things we've got to change, and this is just one of the things we've got to change. So I'll hand the floor over to you, and who am I handing the floor over to? Chair.
Pass. So just to introduce myself, I'm John van der Linden. I'm the current chair of the Hawke's Bay Future Farming Charitable Trust. Just before I sort of talk, I'd just like to introduce the rest of the panel, the trustees that we have with us. So we've got Philip Schofield, who's the vice chair, Liz Crouchick, Scott Lawson, who's the treasurer, Tom Wilson, of course, you all know, and Will Foley, you all know as well. And I think one of the things that we'll touch on later, and it was touched on in the report, was what we're going now, there's 7 active members. We're looking to restructure, not necessarily restructure, but structure the trust in such a way that we also have a good Māori representation as well going forward. So that's something that's coming at us, that we'll address in the next few weeks or months going forward. So just about the trustees, I think I know these numbers don't add up to 7, but we've got 4 current farmers, 3 current or ex-growers, and 3 actively people actively servicing the primary industry in a range of sort of tasks. So there's a lot of experience, a lot of enthusiasm, and I think all the trustees are very, very positive about the future of Hawke's Bay, brand Hawke's Bay. So that's a great bunch to work with. I think we all offer different perspectives, but work well together as a group.
Including Greg, when we mentioned Greg.
Oh, sorry, Greg Hart sends his apologies. Yeah, he's actually busy working. Sorry about that. Thank you, Tom. So since I think our first substantive meeting on the 19th of September, we've basically been working out who we are, what we do, and some of the achievements that we've put in place are things like developing a digital presence, so a website, Facebook page, We've been sorting out the accounts, getting all the those systems in place. Also systems for things like applying for research funding, developing criteria so that we can work out which projects we want to support and which ones we don't. And making a lot of industry linkages. There's a lot of people here that already have linkages, so bringing those linkages forward with the trust is very, very important. The other thing, we've developed a vision and a mission. Now, I'll just read those out. The mission is already stated, but the vision is to make Hawke's Bay the pride of our entire community. I think the word community is very, very important there. And the mission is to inspire, promote and celebrate profitable farming systems that enrich the environment and the community. So I think one of the other things is all trustees believe that we should have a long-term focus on the soil health, in particular carbon, in terms of as an indicator of a vibrant, healthy soil. And but not only just soil health on its own, it's also the interaction between the plants and the animals and how on that land as well. And I think that's something that is common right across all the trustees. In terms of working out what we do and what we should be doing, I think we've identified now that about 25% of our resource should be allocated towards communication, telling the stories, the good news stories that are out there. There are a lot of people that are doing very good things, and they might not necessarily be all the whole system changed in a very positive way, but they're parts of their growing system or farming systems that are actually working very well. And so if we can capture those stories and promote them, that's got to be positive for the rest of the farming community. In particular, things like riparian planting on slopes. I was involved with a soil water project where we saved up to 80% of the water we normally used by just changing the way that we approach the water scheduling in the application. So stories like that are really powerful if you can get those out into the community. The second part of what the Trust's priorities are really around evidence building. I think Greg, who's not here today, well, there's a common saying that goes, I'll believe it when I see it, but Greg actually had a nice twist on that, which is I'll see it when I believe it. And I think there's a number of things at the moment in terms of regen farming where perhaps some people's eyes are quite blinkered to it, and so what we need to do is actually prove that it can actually work and provide some empirical data to back up that it's not only profitable but it's good for our environment, and then more and more people will actually take that on. So those are our two main priorities, and about 75% of our resource will go towards that evidence building, as we call it. But one of the other things that we've actually already started on, and I think will become a bigger and bigger part of our trust, is actually the extension, because it's all very well telling the stories, but I think a lot of the benefit of what the trusts do is actually getting people to helping people take their first steps towards that future. So with that in mind, things like workshops, sometimes like the Regen Ag workshop we did recently in Clive and Central Hawke's Bay, attracted over 300 farmers, which is a fantastic result. But sometimes the end game can look a bit daunting, so you need to take it back and sort of hold their hands through the first steps, and I think that's a big part of what the Trust will do in the future. And so that might require a little bit more resource than we've currently got, or reallocation of the resource that we've currently got. Lastly, I'd just like to cover off some of the projects that we've approved. So we've committed about $6,000 towards doing some profiles of farmers, and if that is successful, we will do at least 6 profiles. So they're $3,000 per profile, which is quite a lot, but it involves videos and research, and so we will do more of those. The other thing, we've committed $12,000 towards carbon measurement. Scott, you might cover this in your reports, I'm not sure. And then we've also committed some funding, but up to $40,000 for an economic environmental model that Barry Riddler's doing, called a E2M model, model. So that's part of the process of gathering that empirical data to back up, the changes in farming systems. And then we've also spent some money on the regen ag workshops that were currently carried out by Peter Barrett and John O'Frew, and that was $1,500 plus a little bit for morning tea. And then we've also just committing some money towards grazing management project as well. So that's probably it from me, but are there any questions that you would like to ask the group?
Does Scott want to talk about that particular issue that you're working on, or do you want us to go straight to questions for you? Does anyone else want to say anything?
Just open it up to this.
Okay, rightio. Martin.
Thank you everyone for coming along and presenting to us. This is in some ways topic du jour. It's an idea whose time has come, I guess, in a lot of respects. I'm interested in the Barry Riddler work. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, can I deflect this to you, Tom?
Yeah, what that project involves is going on to 10 farms here in the region. Some of them will be dairy, some of them will be sheep and beef. And what he does basically, we're not financing the building of his model. He has a model that has been peer reviewed and used elsewhere in the country, including by the government. And what it does is let us go onto a farm and sort of baseline all the inputs, all the costs, everything that is going on in that system.
Yeah.
In terms of economics, outputs, environmental outputs, productivity, the whole picture basically. So that we're selecting a number of farms that we think are at different places strategically, if you will,
Yeah.
in terms of the evidence that we would like to bring forward from doing those. Some of those farms are, for example, dairy moving to organic dairy. Some of them are traditional sheep and beef farms. Some of them are regenerative focused farms. And to the point of the evidence that John mentioned, we really see that what we think we need to deliver is Hawke's Bay generated evidence at the end of the day. There's a lot of these folks that we're encountering who are making these kind of changes they're self-educated, they're finding it online, they're finding videos, they're reading books, they're going to the occasional webinar, workshop somewhere out of the region. But I guess our sense is that the more we can deliver the evidence from our own home turf, the more compelling it'll be. And so what we will do is work our way through those 10 farms initially, do that benchmarking, and then begin to monitor various interventions that come out of that. So the result of him going on a farm is that he will identify different practice changes that that system or that farmer might adopt. Those will get rolled out. We'll see what the results of that are, crank that into the system, hopefully show at the end of the day we've demonstrated a way to make improvement.
You?
Can I just add,
Yep.
part of that model which Tom talked about, it's environmental and economic, so it measures profitability, I suppose, if you like, versus just straight out production. And I think part of the problem is we've been driving production too much at the cost of environment. And it's not always, high production is not always the sweetest spot in terms of profitability. So what this does is very clever because it can look at inputs like nitrogen, for example, work out leaching, but also work on profitability, and it finds that sweet spot where it is profitable and environmentally friendly at the same time. So it's quite an exciting model from what we've seen.
Can I just ask Mr. Chairman a question of Scott, whoever wants to answer it? I read in the Productivity Commission report, Low Emission Economy, the debate about whether soil sequestration of carbon should be factored into our carbon accounting system, and it was sort of like, as I recall reading it, it's too hard, we're not there yet. What is the block there, and how does this research help resolve that block in the system, if you like?
I'll answer that one for you, Martin. The block is the fact that we don't really know what's happening to soil carbon in New Zealand. So when I say we, I talk about government soil science. knowledge. Ever since Kyoto, we didn't really understand whether our soil carbon was going up or going down
Yeah.
under our farming systems. So we left soil carbon out.
Yeah.
There's growing evidence globally that certain farm practices, loosely called regenerative farming, can increase or build topsoil. And if you increase or build topsoil, you will increase soil carbon. There's a few people around, myself included, that have been changing farm system management on farms for many years now, and most of us can measure changes in length and density and topsoil depth. And where we're measuring soil carbon, we can measure changes in soil carbon. Where we're up to in New Zealand at the moment officially is we don't know what's happening to soil carbon. What we would like to do over the next few years is quite quickly show that changing farm system management will change the amount of carbon in the soil. Both good and bad. We know that if we put a lot of synthetic inputs on the soil, we can make soil carbon go down. We're quite good at that. We need to know how to make soil carbon go up and keep it going up.
Can I just add, yeah, I mean, part of the challenge is actually proving soil carbon from a soil carbon or a carbon accounting point of view, and we're also interested in looking at soil carbon as from a soil health point of view, because increases in soil carbon also, you know, indicate a healthy, productive soil with high water holding capacity. And I think Phil mentioned there was a statistic that a 1% change in soil carbon from 5% to 6%, for example, can hold an extra 150,000 litres of water per hectare, which is the equivalent of 15 mil of rainfall. So those figures have huge impacts on, you know, water security, for example. And I think, and not only that, but if we change the way we work and we end up with a deeper topsoil, we end up with a bigger reservoir. So, you know, we can hold more within the reservoir we've got, plus develop a bigger reservoir as well. So those are some of the benefits of soil carbon.
And similar benefits for nutrient retention, of course, as well.
So the popular perception probably is that a lot of this regenerative stuff is fringe, that it's, you know, it's the outliers who are doing it. I got a newsletter today that I get from abroad on regenerative agriculture, and of course the first item in it was that Willie Nelson, his farm, 500 acres in Texas, was converting to regen agriculture. But the next item was that Cargill was committing to a 20-year program in which they expect to recapture 600 billion cubic meters of water. And they're doing it because they're investing in farms and as suppliers who are regenerative agriculture committed, because of the water retention issue that's been raised here and the capacity of better soils to hold more water. And so if anything, we might have thought we were coming on the loading ramp of an expressway and expecting slow-moving traffic at rush hour. And the fact of the matter is the expressway is moving pretty quickly, and we're here trying to catch up with it in some respects. So there are plenty of big players. Bayer, another company that you don't associate with small farming, is doing the same thing. They've committed to a program where they are, again, their suppliers will be regenerative agriculture suppliers because of the benefits they think that can bring them in terms of cost savings and water reduction use, etc. So, and you would have seen this sort of thing. So I think it's fair to say this group, you know, we probably started 6 months ago a bit more agnostic than what we've become, really, in terms of looking at what's going on in this country and elsewhere in this particular space. And I think at this point we're not terribly bashful about saying that that's the direction that we want to establish is workable here in Hawke's Bay.
Any other questions? Will, do you, anyway, and then I might come to you, Will, as our representative on the committee.
Right. Kia ora tātou, thank you for coming in to present. But I'm really supportive of what you're doing. It's very future focused for land use change, and it's timely. It's probably later than we'd like, but hey, we've got to start somewhere. I just want to know a bit more around your relationships within the community, particularly with other council-related forums and groups, such as the Rural Advisory Group Trust or the Tukituki Leaders Forum, just to understand how you fit with those other forums, if there is a fitting point.
Looking at me.
Yeah. Well, I think we're still in the formative stages of setting up those links, and I think we've got a number of leads that we're working on at the moment. But I think the last 6 months or so has really been just getting our feet under the table and working out what we are and who we are. We definitely have identified that we need to develop linkages, and we've got some of those underway. It's just how we work those. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else anyone.
Yeah, we have talked to MPI, we've talked to Land Care, we've talked to Landwise here in the area. We've talked to Beef and Lamb. Beef and Lamb is conducting its own international study now in this area of regen agriculture because they're sensing that's the direction of things. And we have had quite a bit of engagement with the staff here in terms of what they're doing in the integrated catchment management space. And John referred to extension. I think there's no mystery that sort of face-to-face interaction is the pathway to adoption. And the more that we can stimulate or undertake, the better off, faster we're going to make change.
If I could just add something to that, sorry, just to say that we wish to be inclusive, not exclusive, and we're wishing to speak to lots of different groups all the time, and some of the groups may have differing views on one side of their policy than the rest, but we're just open to discussing and building channels of communication with people. So, but we don't want to be duplicating what's already been done. We've talked about that at board table before too. So something like the drought response was an interesting one because people were coming to us looking for funds and bits and pieces, people were questioning us, and we're saying that's not our space. So we have to be careful we'd have linkage, but not go and do something that somebody else is being charged with, like the Rural Advisory Group, for instance. We can be part of the solution longer term, and that's where we wish to develop those strategies.
Craig?
Thanks very much, everyone. A couple of questions. First and foremost, the part of the original mandate was to try and work, segues from what you were just saying, to seek other funding to get leveraging off these partnerships you've got out there. How is that going, and was there anything relatively positive in the pipeline out there to assist with your funding?
I'll deal with that if you like. There is a lot of interest on the part of MPI through their SFF funds to do research in the space we're talking about. MPI late last year had a workshop and called a whole lot of us together to talk about the work that's required to prove the concepts of regen ag for New Zealand farmers, horticulturalists. So that group's had only one meeting and a few discussions, but we at MPI are employing a couple of scientists at the moment to look into what research should be done and how it should be done on farms around New Zealand. That's kind of put a bit of a slowdown on applications for funding or big amounts of funding in this space. But we are talking to MPI and Land Care about that work, and similarly your staff here to do group funding applications to the SFF or MPI funds.
So it sounds like you're kind of getting it in kind as opposed to someone else writing a cheque. You're just all in the same game together.
No, we're looking for MPI to fund a lot of the costs of the field work that needs to be done.
Yeah, okay. So, and I appreciate you only been going for 8-9 months or something, and you've got a pretty healthy bank balance. But your report there shows, you've just been getting everything up and underway. Appreciate that, no problem there at all. So everyone's a bit tight for cash at the moment, and you've got committed funding from the council again this year, or next financial year. Is there any, you're describing some of the programs, 40K for the guy to do the analysis and all that kind of stuff. As part of your budget planning, that will be used for the purposes that which it's given. Can you see it being chewed up this year, or do you think there might be some residual there at the end of the day?
We're certainly working within our budget. I don't know you want to working within our budgets, and I think what a lot of the work that we're doing, we won't necessarily fund solely ourselves. We'll aim to co-fund.
Yeah.
And then we have spoken, but we need to address that, I think, in the next little while in terms of fund generation. We have spoken about sponsorship and also just projects that where we align sponsors with those, rather than just being, because we do recognise that it's a finite pool that we have.
Yeah, okay, that's fine, thanks. And just finally, why do you think, and Tom, your explanation of it's more better farming than regenerative farming, that's one and the same, but actually financially, business-wise and environmentally-wise, you can have a better result given some of the work that you're doing. Can you just speculate, if you want, for a moment, why is that not more prevalent out there? Someone doing 1,500 acres in Tico or something, as they always have. Yeah, well, we're a bit worried about the question I've asked now. But there's this kind of a failure of the financial incentives don't seem to be getting through if it's as well as been described. And I know people are on board with you and have seen great results. But I always wonder why it's not more widespread.
Mainstream agriculture at the moment is supported by synthetic fertiliser and a whole lot of herbicides, fungicides and insecticides. Regenerative agriculture, or the kind of good land management practices that we want to foster, don't have a place for those inputs. So that means most of the agricultural industry at the moment is not that keen on these kind of farm systems, because they're not ready for them yet. They need to change the products that they offer their farmers. That will happen. It'll take time. John's view.
No, I was just going to add, given that I work for one of those, but anyway, one of the things is a lot of production tends to be production driven. If you look at Fonterra, it's all about production, and I think there is a sweet spot where, if you're milking a cow, you don't want to be driving that cow at 500 to 600 kilos of milk solids a year, because the whole system's working at its max, ready to explode. It's better off to have that cow working at 400 kilograms of milk solids a year, and having less inputs, less imported palm kernel oil, less purchase feed. And so there is a sweet spot where you have less inputs, and and that includes the fertilisers and herbicides as well. But and so that's broadly, I think, our agricultural system has been we've been programmed to produce and better, bigger is better. So it's a bit of a mind shift, and we have to show people that you can be profitable at less production.
I think that's part of the reason why we've opted to try this thing with Barry Riddler, because he is totally focused on the economics. He starts with the economics of it, and he identifies exactly how you are spending your money and exactly what your incremental dollar is producing, both on the bad side and on the plus side. And it generally leads to not extravagant interventions that are needed. They're actually rather incremental ones in terms of what seeds you're sowing, how much diversity of ground cover you have, what your grazing patterns are, that sort of thing. It's not like there's some gigantic silver bullet out there. But it's measurable. It is all measurable. And I think our feeling has been that that's what has to be documented, because people will dismiss that these outliers are well, they're not really farmers. They're operating a lodge, or they're doing this or they're doing that, when the fact of the matter is, as we've tried to identify which are the farms that we want to produce material on, do videos and do the research and so forth, there are plenty of farmers around Hawke's Bay who are doing quite well, thank you, despite a drought in central Hawke's Bay and elsewhere and so forth. There are plenty of people who have lush pastures out there, and it's because of how they farm. It's, you know, it's as simple as that.
Thank you, Tom. Records are important because we're really getting out of time here. I'm sure it's important. Off you go.
My question is
And then to you, Will, to wind us up.
my question is to Tom. You were the person who drove this initiative from the beginning and was its staunchest advocate. You're now on the inside of it. I'd like to hear from you. Is this farming trust meeting your expectations that you had when you started? Is it doing better than you thought? Is it doing less than you thought? And what has your interaction with these people in this practical effect changed your mind about?
What a loaded question.
We're simple answer, yes.
Well, you'll only answer honestly, Tom. I'm not going to ask you what they think of me because I don't want anybody else to hear that.
Look, we all know that we didn't get this thing constituted until December.
No.
Okay, so we went through some institutional growing pains of sorting out who's who and what's what. We got that sorted. I think the change that kind of represented was that the working group that had been operating a year, basically, to try to shape this into something before appointing trustees and so forth, probably was probably a wider group in terms of its where the different people on the spectrum were in terms of what's the challenge for agriculture or farming in Hawke's Bay. Without there being a strategy involved, the net of what happened in terms of how we got ourselves constituted is, I think we did find ourselves with a bunch of people, you know, across all 7 of us who are on the same page. And it took us a bit of time to discover that was the case, that we all are, you know, in the same hymn book here in terms of what we think needs to be done, and that the way to get more of this done is to really telegraph and celebrate the leading edge folks. And that's what ultimately will demonstrate that this is a smarter thing to do. As some of you are aware, when the agriculture minister was in town next, he went and looked at a variety of drought related farms, and we sent out some material, or somebody sent out some material that said, well, why don't you go down the road here and look at this one? It happens to be a set of farms that Phil has been working on for some time, quite different circumstances for that farmer. And so I guess my view is that we have a group of people who are really on the same page in terms of what has to be done and what its benefits could be. You all are debating water security and climate resilience and so forth, and we think that we're pushing in a direction where we would like to see farming practices adopted that make a major contribution to resolving those issues. And we think we can come up with the proof. Now we need some time to do that. I think we've put some appropriate building blocks in place. We know what we're doing. We have some initial projects we think are cornerstone projects. We now have to build the relationships with others in the community to expand what we're doing. But I'm pleased as punch.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Now, will you just wind us up?
Yeah.
To the 3/4 of an hour. Tom was asking for an hour, but he's not getting an hour. He's got 3/4 of an hour, though.
No,
Which
look,
has moved from 10 minutes.
If I could just say thank you to the team for coming in, and I think you've done a pretty good job at presenting exactly what has happened in the last 9 months and where we're up to. So I jumped on board in December as it states, and yeah, like anyone, I was probably a little bit frustrated with the the time to set up, but I think it had to go through that. We had to find our feet, and you know, ever since that point, I think we've seen progress in you know, setting up projects and heading the direction we want to head. I think for me, you know, while this was spoken about and planned in the last few years, the biggest thing for me was not reinventing the wheel. Farmers pay plenty of money towards levies and research, and so, you know, we simply didn't want to replicate that. So I think you know, it is on that different path, even though we're seeing beef and lamb and MPI take an interest in this type of alternative farming now. So and yeah, I think yeah, Tom summed it up. We now need time to come up with a proof to answer Councillor Foss's question, and you know, hopefully in 12 months' time we'll be we'll have some results and be well on that way. So yeah, thank you, team.
Thank you very much, and thank you, you guys. We really do appreciate the work you're doing. You know, it's really innovative stuff, and we want to drive our community to be the market leaders on all fronts: climate change, farming practices, just everything we do. We need to be the leading edge community, and you're a really important part of that. So really appreciate you coming along today. Really appreciate the work you do. I imagine you do. You're all volunteers, and you do an enormous amount of work because of your passion. And so, thanks from our community. Do I have someone to receive this report, please? Will you move to receive the report? Rick, seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for coming in.
Very well. Team? Very good.
Okay, what we're going to do... Michelle, you can go back to your seat. Where are you? Oh, you never moved. Okay, what we'll do then, we will do that. Where's my one?
Is Neil coming back at all today?
Oh, I thought he
Right
was.
behind you.
Yeah,
Sorry?
where's
Right behind you.
Here we go. So what we'll do is we will go to, yes, Neil coming back.
Yeah, he's back here now.
Right here.
He's back here now.
We made great progress this morning, so that will now come to a screaming halt. Close the meeting.
We reckon we got half an hour with you being away.
So do you think maybe
Can I suggest we do go down to
climate
the...
medication?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
We will go back to item 16, which is the climate change mitigation. Councillor Barker's notice of motion is within it. Okay.
So, Chair, this is a relatively lengthy paper, so I don't propose to go through it in great length, given that councillors will have had an opportunity to read the material. What we've done since the last discussion at the Environment and Integrated Catchments Committee meeting is flesh out some of the discussion that was had there and provided some further information about what we understand about the regional national landscape in which the proposal would be operating, and we've also, as I said earlier on in our discussion on the communications plan, had a discussion on Monday with the other local councils, and just on that, I should report a little bit more fully, as proposed in the paper, that I would, that there was a high level of enthusiasm about collaborating with the regional council on climate change broadly. Some questions around the balance between adaptation and mitigation, and a general sentiment that the other councils aren't ready to commit to a proposition of this nature at this time, but are interested in having further dialogue with us and exploring what that might look like in time. They are also obviously thinking about long-term plans and how they might contribute in the context of their long-term plan to an exercise of this nature. So I think there's a good foundation for us to have further engagement with the other councils on the regional effort on climate mitigation, and a bit more information obviously in here about the activities that both councils doing and others are doing in the region. So we're left in a situation where certainly the staff advice remains that funding this out of the Disaster Damage Reserve Fund is problematic without a change to the purpose of that fund. and it's our view that consultation would be appropriate for such a change to that purpose. And then otherwise that the most appropriate time to consider this is alongside all other council priorities under the long-term plan, which is not to say that all the other work that we're doing, including the climate change communications campaign outlined earlier on and the whole raft of programs council is doing, certainly will continue. Well, it's not to say they won't continue. And one of the key things we'd like to achieve with the communications campaign is a heightened level of public awareness, ratepayer awareness around what the council is doing on climate change and what the climate change issues are for the region. So it's probably a pretty high-level summary of what's in the paper. Kerry and Gavin are here, and Gavin did most of the drafting on the paper, so we can answer any questions that councillors have.
Yeah, and just before we do that, Rick, this is you. Do you want to comment before we go to questions?
Well, I think the way which Leanne has laid out is that we have to have, by notice of motion put, notice of motion moved, seconded and carried. Following that, we then move to, I would see, the substantive debate. So it doesn't get over that line where we stop. So I think let's just get the procedural thing out of the way, test the mood of the meeting, and move it as almost like a procedural motion. I think we pretty much know where we are. Once we've got through that, we then come back to substance and work out what is it we're going to move as a consequence of that. Is that how we got that right?
If you agree.
That being the case, Chair, I'll simply move without any flourish or speech by notice of motion and seek a seconder.
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
You second, move and second, you better...
I just think you should put the motion, I think we all know it is, and then
That's
just,
right.
once it lives, we then go on to the debate. If it falls, well, we go to the next item on the agenda.
Neil, do you wish to speak, or you just...
Oh, I just, well,
You haven't spoken all day.
No, I've been holding my breath all this time. Excuse me, side joke here.
Yeah, I get it now.
I'm just interested to hear a greater explanation from staff about the implications and entertain the debate. So it's about finding out more information about this as we go. So happy to proceed to the next stage.
So you agree, we move the, you're seconding it, and we're moving the notice of motion. So we have a notice of motion as presented, as you all can read, by Councillor Barker, seconded by Neil. So, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? You wish to be, do you wish, what do you call it?
Recorded.
Recorded? Do you want
Do
your...
that, you should ask for a show of hands on both sides.
Yeah. All those in favour? Against?
This is just to receive the motion, isn't it?
Yeah.
And consider it.
Okay, it's passed. Right, now we're into the detail.
I think at this stage, could I suggest to you, Chair, before we go to moving a substantive motion, given there's a number of them in here, a number of options, it would be helpful if the Chief Executive outlined in a bit more detail what the implications of each of the options are. I've had to get my Stella restarted. All my notes on my thing have been lost, wiped. So I just want to make the point again, if I can, lightly. The IT system has let me down yet again.
So, Chair, the options in the paper are designed to enable the committee either to adopt the notice of motion in whole or to pass the issue through to the long-term plan or to come up with a revised set of recommendations which could be drawn in part or whole from the notice of motion as currently drafted. So, look, I think in terms of the substantive staff advice, it remains that we've got work to do leading up to the long-term plan. That is the appropriate vehicle for considering a proposal of the scale and nature, in our view, and the paper notes that there is considerable amount of work going on both within the regional council and across the region on climate mitigation-related issues, and therefore we've got more work to do to fully understand that ecosystem of activity, to develop, as we would across any proposal of council, a business case to bring through the long-term plan that would consider all of the implications of undertaking something of this nature, and then that would enable council to consider that business plan against all other business plans for other proposals.
That's
for the
option
long-term
10,
plan.
James.
That's correct.
So James, could you just explain to me what you mean in 6 setup? Does that mean to go and do it today and move 6 all the way through to 8? Is that effectively, is that the option which would give us effect to the notice of motion to start today? Is that right?
Correct.
Well, that being the case, I'll move, for the sake of starting this, or give notice of others who've got other questions, move option 6, 7 and 8.
Just bear with me.
So rather than go to the long-term plan, Rick wants to get straight into it. 6, 7 and 8.
Can I just ask a procedural question? Sorry. Just this is or is not a significant matter, and I'm unclear because one of the recommendations is us deciding if it's significant or not. So can you just go a bit deeper in your explanation as to what you just said? Because I just take your advice on that, but I've got 2 options here from you.
So whether or not it's significant or not is something for council to determine, and there's a balance of considerations that you need to consider in arriving at that determination. The paper does suggest that in the staff view, establishing this is significant, and therefore it would require public consultation. So as drafted in here under recommendation 5, what is proposed is, if you are proceeding with this, is that you are recommending or agreeing that a public consultation process should be undertaken, and indeed that would be part of standing this up. But this is where this notice of motion gets complex, because if you agree that creating this new service is significant, then you need to consult, but the notice of motion is drafted in such a way as to not be contingent on a consultation, but to proceed with it right now. So the way it's been drafted is effectively faithful to the notice of motion, but consultation will be required unless you decide that it's not significant, and therefore that would be an amendment to 5 as drafted, and there wouldn't be consultation, and you would be standing up the function.
So we make the decision, but your advice is it is as proposed. So
That is staff advice to you.
Mr. Chairman, am I correct that Councillor Barker moved 6, 7 and 8, but not 5?
I was indicating that's where I would go.
Yeah.
Can I just, then the point about that is then I'm just stepping around, by doing that, stepping around the advice of staff, that it's significant. I believe that in fact it is not significant. I'm very happy to take on the chin about the argument over that. It's in a matter of whether you want to wait and do something or start tomorrow. That's the issue. It's about whether it's the urgency of the matter, or whether we mill around on the decks of the Titanic and figure out whether people are going to go in height order or birth date or whatever order it is.
Now, all that in mind, can I ask another procedural question, please, Mr. Chairman? At what point in this debate do we introduce, if we wish to, amendments to the motion that Councillor Barker's just put? Is there a discussion on this first, or can you just remind me of the process? Because I have one in mind.
So,
Could I help with that, Chair? I haven't actually moved, it was just indicated verbally that that's what I'd like to do.
Right.
I think it would be helpful if Councillor Williams had it in mind, an amendment. He just sort of explains, sets out what it is without moving it, and we'll all hear it, have a debate. At the end, we could probably come to an agreement where we stand, yeah.
All right. Well, if we're able to foreshadow without putting motions, and we are equally able to discuss those motions when they are put. Can I just say that I've got huge sympathy with what Councillor Barker has just shared, but equally believe myself duty bound not to displace statutory consultation obligations that are incumbent on this council. So my amended motion would be something like 5, and then 6 would be instructs staff to investigate, report and recommend consultation program in the lead up to the long-term plan with a view to setting up a semi-autonomous unit similar to civil defence to be called Climate Change Mitigation Hawke's Bay. So it's trying to integrate 5 and 6 so that they don't kind of oppose each other, and not for want of acceptance about the absolute urgency of this, but equally that I think we've got. I won't speak any further to that, but I'm alive to the fact that we are surveying our communities about this issue in the next little while. So I'm trying to.
Chair, could I clarify Councillor Williams' suggestion? Are you suggesting a consultation ahead of the long-term plan, or are you suggesting that Council resolves today some component of the long-term plan consultation
on this topic?
On this topic.
More the latter.
The latter?
Yes, that we road test this, because we are, as I understand it, going to be road testing a number of the other high-level topics that will be like climate change. We've just had the presentation earlier.
Quite right.
So that when we formally notify the long-term plan for consultation, we understand the appetite and the effectiveness, potential effectiveness of this proposal.
So as part of the pre-consultation?
Yes.
So we could look at what a pre-consultation might look like that would be compliant with the Local Government Act.
That's what I guess what I'm leaning towards.
Ahead of the formal LGA consultation on the proposed long-term plan.
So I'm not putting that, I'm just foreshadowing that that's an option.
I'm just trying to understand what it means, though. I haven't quite got it. So we do it in terms of the long-term plan, which starts in when?
Well, we would be consulting on the proposed long-term plan in its formal sense in March or April next year.
21.
So.
And we would finish the consultation when?
Well, we'd be deliberating, making final decisions in June.
And we would then
hearings in May, live on the 1st of July next year.
Live 1st of July. So we'd then be looking at, before we may start, we'd be looking at the back end of July 2021.
Yes, correct.
But we would be doing pre-consultation on it, testing it, shaping it from now.
But we're still the difference is that one was looking to go immediately, the other's 12 months plus. Yeah. Yep.
Bill? Can I just ask the question, Chief Executive, a standalone consultation in short order, can you advise as to what's the possibility, what's the cost, what's the implications of doing so? So we're caught between a rock and a hard place here, between a longer term, a long burn or a slow burn. I'm just interested to know what we can do.
Well, it would be an amendment to the current long-term plan, and therefore we'd need to meet the normal disciplines around ensuring that all residents and ratepayers of the region could reasonably be expected to have known that the changes proposed. So that puts some presumption on the types of communications that we might need to do. We've obviously most recently done a long-term plan amendment in relation to, apart from the annual report, the report last year. That was a multi-round consultation and also involved a significant volume of material, which this wouldn't involve. I think you'd put a ring around sort of $30,000 to $40,000 if we were to have a postcard for every household, for example, and have the normal sort of web presence and what have you.
And the time frame for that?
Look, 3 months is about the fastest we could do that. But it will come on top of a fairly full work program for the team that are presently preparing the long-term plan and building the community engagement program around that.
So if we went down the pathway, as Councillor Williams has foreshadowed, we could have Councillor Barker's proposal up and running August, September, October by this side of the new year, the side of the current year, and calendar year.
It depends how you're funding it, because I guess given that the annual plan has just been set and there's no operational funding for this purpose, then I'm taking it that the proposal would be to draw down on the disaster damage reserve. So you would be consulting on changing the purpose of that fund and drawing down on that.
Are there other sources such as borrowing we can entertain?
Yes, but yeah, and that would be another variation to the annual plan and long-term plan.
But currently in Councillor Barker's motion, it is the disaster fund.
So, Mr. Chair, Councillor Barker, you were kind of just checking the waters, if you like. So I feel I take strongly the advice of the CEO that this is significant, and I hear what you just said. I do not have enough experience or knowledge to argue with that, so I'll just take that on board first and foremost. And I also am uncomfortable with using the disaster fund for this purpose. Having said that, as I said in it the first time this arrived, I'm very much in the same frustrating camp, I think, that many of us are in, of seeing something going on or happening in something we're all very, very interested and passionate about. And sorry, just as an aside, there's a point in there that the FARS committee is looking at this, and I'm very confident that the FARS committee will end up recommending Hawke's Bay Regional Council we do an audit of the council itself, of its own carbon footprint measurement, management, mitigation, etc. as per what's linked to this, but a side issue, but FARS is mentioned in your paper, in this paper. So I think I said last time, you've designed a model to try and make action of respected and learned people in our region, and I wish that well, but there are still many questions to it. So I'm desperately looking around for something to satisfy my two concerns I said at the start there. I'm very nervous that this organisation itself cannot look the rest of the region in the eye and advise or tell it what to do without the integrity of understanding our own larger footprint, but very much in your camp of something which has some teeth to help affect this, but even the Future Farming Trust people, they were referencing the carbon footprint and carbon mitigation management themselves. So stuff's happening. It's trying to corral that. So as you proposed your proposal to us, so I can't support it as is given what I've said, but I'm still trying to find a way through to try and find a way for us to deliver, or for you to be able to deliver the kind of action or accountable steps that I think you're seeking to find, or at least I'm seeking to find.
Well, Chairman, can I just go back to the point I made before? We have reduced our carbon footprint, our carbon in 10 years by 7%. We're required to reduce it 7% every year. We are seriously behind the eight ball. We have had climate change at the centre of our strategy, centre of everything we do. But I have to say to you, I haven't seen the necessary traction on this that I would expect. I'm increasingly concerned about the lack of commitment to this at a local level. I can't worry about what the Chinese will do with their coal-fired power stations. I can only worry about what we do here. And I think we do need a dedicated resource to shove this issue along, and quickly. Not next year, the year after, 10 years' time. Every time we miss a year of saving 7%, it means we've got to save more yet again, and the cliff gets higher and higher and higher. We can only be responsible for what we hear. And I do think that because we've got at the centre of everything we do is no one's focus. It needs to have a group which is their focus to hold everybody to account and to challenge us all on what we do. Hence this unit, to do it the way we do it in a cooperative way. Yes, rules are there, and I respect, as I have always done, the advice of staff, but I haven't always agreed with it. That's my job as a governor. There's on occasions I've been told clearly that such and such is the right way to do it, and because of my governance position, I've accepted the advice but done something differently. That's what we do. Their job is to tell us exactly as the rule is. They're doing exactly what they are, and I respect that and would not change it one jot. I'm not here to tell me what I'm not. The people at staff are not here to tell me what they think I want to hear. The moment they do that, we're dead. So I'm really committed to doing something, and I'm happy to row on it if we have to. But I'm just concerned about the time delay. I can find every reason to not do something. Process, questions, need to weigh this up, whether. I just personally think Martin Williams' view, the other, I was very impressed with your speech, Martin. It's about war. You don't consult on these things, you do it. And I'm at that point. I wish I'd said your speech. I was envious of it. Right. He's got me in a thing. It's about war. It's about doing it, and that's it. And I just think on occasions we have to strike out and do something because it's right. Not because of the process, it's right. So I think I'm going to move my resolution, as I've said there, as a 6, which puts effectively 6, 7 and 8. Let's do it. And if we get sufficient support around this table, well, we get it, and away we go. If we have to have a discussion with the OAG about it, well, so be it. We'll have that discussion. And we'll claim the moral authority for doing the right thing. And I'm reminded of Martin Luther King. It's always the right time to do the right thing. And I do think this is the right thing, and I don't think any delay is going to be helpful. I am desperately worried about the future. I'm desperately worried about it for my grandkids and other generations. And I think every day we delay, we just increase the problem. So I'll move that, and I'll look for a seconder, and we'll see where we go. If it falls, it falls. And we'll all be held to account for our votes. So make no mistake about it. This is a significant vote on this issue here today in this council.
Chair, through you, if I could just get a point of clarification from Councillor Barker. Under the Local Government Act, you are required in making a decision to make a determination as to whether you consider the matter to be significant or otherwise, which is obviously the purpose of recommendation number 5. Are you proposing a recommendation or a motion to council that would be to agree that this decision is not significant?
But yes, I'm happy to do that, and this fits entirely with the purpose of this council's activities.
That's right.
And consistent with its declaration of a climate emergency.
One question, Rick, before you've moved, I know that, but it's very prescriptive, isn't it? A minimum of 3 staff.
Yeah.
Is that important to you to keep those sort of things in there?
Well,
like these really prescriptive things?
I'm happy for it to be watered down, but sufficient staff. I went to, if it's 1 staff member, they're not going to be able to do a thing. Let's be honest about the whole of Hawke's Bay, 1 staff. 2, very challenging. I thought 3 is a sort of minimum unit you'd like. If you're talking the military, they have units of minimum number of 3. That's what they do. So you've got 1 to lead, 2 to support. If something goes wrong, 1, 2 others. It's just a minimum unit. If people think that we can do it with a different size unit, 4, 5, 6 or 7, well, I'm happy with that too. But I think you're looking at 2. I just put those numbers to be clear about what it was.
Yeah, but this will be a decision of council.
We'll have staff with the necessary official. Take the 3 out. We'll have a minimum number of staff with the necessary facilities and support to be effective. So if you can be effective on 2, well, I'll be okay with that.
Okay, well, we'll need amending to be clear.
I'll take the 3 out. Minimum staff with the necessary facilities and support to be effective. Take the 3 out.
And look, just with respect to 6.1, the region's 4 mayors and the chair of Ngāti Kahungunu will obviously need to, in their own right, resolve to join.
Be invited.
Right, okay.
Propose a governance tranche with invitations to be extended to the 4 mayors and the chair of Kahungunu.
Right.
Yep. If they don't want to be part of it, that's their choice.
But that needs to be amended too.
I'll amend it that way too. Thank you, you've been very helpful here. The other amendments you'd help you suggest, Chair. You've done a great job here.
Just procedurally, can Councillor Barker, just the bit that you're suggesting it's not significant, in your 6, 7 and 8, is that bit in there? Don't we have to deliberately make that decision first?
Rewrite number 5.
Yeah.
Just add the word not, or does
So
not.
either put that, because it kind of comes before 6, 7 and 8, or...
Yeah, but 5 will go in there. It's just put that, so it'll be 5, rewritten, 6, 7 and 8.
Okay.
Chair, could I assist there? Wording about something not being significant is already presented as number 9 as an alternative branch.
Yep.
So if you're looking for the words,
Yeah, I agree with that. It's exactly 9, is it? So move 9, 6, 7 and 8. Chair?
Yeah.
9,
Got it.
6, 7 and 8. It's quite right.
9, 6, 7 and 8.
I forgot about that, Kevin. Thank you. I'd seen that.
You're moving 9, 6, 7 and 8. With that change to that very
Invitations
prescriptive-
and take the 3 out.
Yeah.
All right, any other things you obviously like?
So,
You want to change the name of the group to
I
department?
do,
All right, we'll have
but
it.
I'll do that later. I think it's not a name that, that's good.
Department. Yeah, all right, change the name. Climate Change, Department of Climate Change Mitigation, or Hawke's Bay Regional Council Climate Mitigation Department.
Directorate.
Directorate. This is policy on
Something
things,
we
mate.
can do
This
that
sort of
later.
policy.
Okay, so, we got that.
can I put this up on the board so I can make
Yeah,
sure?
yeah.
Yeah,
You'll need to ask for a seconder, I think.
we do, but we'll get this on the board first, eh?
Shouldn't be laughing, it's too serious, but yeah.
No, but this is, this is some of the, this is great.
Just want to be as helpful as I can to.
Sorry?
I'm very supportive of Councillor Barker's recommendation, but I'm just really struggling with 2 issues. One is you're asking me to support something that says it's not significant when I know it is.
Yes.
And that makes it terribly
What kind
critical.
of significant are we talking about here?
And if we can overcome the significance issue somehow by going to consultation on it, I'd be happy. And the other thing is, I'm looking at 6.1, the governance structure, when I know that that's going to slow the process down for years if we get our 4 mayors around the table with the with the chairman, we'll be here till 2030.
Well, I thought I'd overcome that,
Right.
and invite them to be part of it. It's like a birthday party invitation. You turn up, you enjoy yourself. If you don't, well, you're not there. We just carry on anyway.
Will there be balloons? That's
Yeah, just it's by invitation.
So Neil, on a more pertinent point, are you saying you won't support this unless it's consultation?
I think we have
Excuse
to.
me?
That's where I'm at too, Mr Chairman.
It hasn't been seconded yet.
No.
No, but
Foreshadowing.
we're having a conversation about it, no point. So you're insisting on consultation? You're
It's an
consulting-
A4, an
Give you
A4.
some advice around the actual resolution or the actual motion is that the reason that recommendation was there, that that this decision, if the decision is to instruct staff to set up a semi-autonomous unit similar to civil defence, etc., that is a significant decision because it is a change to the long-term plan and requires consultation with the community.
So that's our advice, Leanne, but Councillor Barker knows that, and he's still of the view that...
So you're still of the view that it is...
But I've said but the point I make to you is that you provide advice. We either accept it or we don't. And we can say we don't accept that advice and move on.
Okay.
The
Yes,
point,
well, that's true.
The point about it is advisors advise, decision makers decide. If otherwise it was advisors, advises it, let's advise the decision makers. Well, that's not how it works. Yeah, not everybody agrees with me on that. I know that, but
It would seem hardly anyone agrees on that. This is the challenge you have.
Well, can he put that motion and we'll see if there's a seconder? Because that,
That could trigger.
well,
It
Neil,
could be.
Neil was suggesting that you two are collaborating down the end there, which
we can backbenchers.
backbenchers are collaborating down there.
But there's a motion on the floor. Councillor Black has done 9, what is it? 9, 6.
9 instead of 5.
Foreshadowed it.
This is just,
So
It's 9 instead of
This down.
5. 9, 6, 7 and 8.
yeah.
But the point, just before we go there, Councillor Curtin said he wants some form of consultation there. So I'm trying to work out what he means, so we figure out whether we make this amendment or otherwise. So
Well, I'd be comfortable with 5
He means 5, Rick.
and just without 6.1 and 6.2.
What?
5, 6,
He's on
7.
yeah. So he doesn't want the. he
Doesn't want your birthday guest.
Yeah.
And they're always having a birthday.
Doesn't 6 need to be subject to the outcomes of that consultation, though? I mean,
Yeah,
it's instructing staff in light of that consultation.
So how would we, just carry on with this, so how could we undertake this consultation ASAP? Chair, the Chief Executive?
Well, we don't have a budget to undertake the consultation, so it would come from the marketing communications budget, which we have just repurposed for the climate change campaign.
Yes.
So yeah, the $25,000 we were planning to spend on the climate change campaign will probably end up getting spent on
No,
the
that's not going to
consultation.
happen. That can't happen.
Oh look,
I know you always.
There is a way forward here. It's quite a simple one.
Well, come on then. We'll look
Well,
for
look,
a simple
the-
solution through.
We're doing this consultation that we've got the budget for, and it's going to ask us the question, what is the appetite of this region to pay more for climate change? Is the regional council the organisation to do that? It just seems to me to be a natural second step to introduce the idea of an autonomous directorate on the back of that in our lead up to the long-term plan. Now, whether you did that through some formal postcard thing or just as one of the components of long-term plan consultation is probably the question. I'm despite being in Councillor Barker's urgency camp, of the view that we step off the campaign for consultation we've already got into this being one of our informal consultation topics on the idea of an autonomous directorate that sits on this issue. And then we know by formal consultation whether this has got legs, we don't breach the law, and we're as urgent as we can be. So that's what I think is the sensible way forward on this.
so that we can easily accommodate, but the substantive decision-making will be in the context of the long-term plan.
Absolutely.
And if council does wish to proceed with it off the back of the pre-consultation, then it would be part of the audited set of proposals, which will go through the Office of the Auditor General and then be formally consulted on. But to be clear, we still wouldn't go live with anything until 1 July.
Understand that.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that's kind of where I am, despite that I'd love to second this motion. I want to panel beat the concept a little bit, but I'd love to second the motion, but I can't.
Yeah, one of the things I've picked up from this conversation is that when we workshopped with you on the 11th of March, and I think admittedly our recollection is that Councillor Barker wasn't present in that workshop, there was $200,000 set aside that was planned for the annual plan around climate change. And it was taken out, instruction of council, because you wanted a zero rates increase and there was to be no additional expenditure. And that, of course, is...
the zero? Can we go back?
Right. So unfortunately, we've ended up in a situation where we've adopted an annual plan today that doesn't have resourcing for this purpose. And yet this notice of motion came in over the top of that process as we were finalising.
Timing is everything, isn't it?
can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
What, the air conditioning?
Yeah.
Yeah. Too cold now?
Too hot.
Too
I'm
hot.
trying to take this off, but I'm
Hello.
afraid I've been the same shop as Mr. Curtin there, so that is 2-for-1 sale on.
Just been there too.
These man's got
Anybody
some
willing
colour.
to look at that?
What have you done? The red bit.
Yeah, red bit.
No, the people aren't going to go for it, not significant.
The thing about it is that what I think Neil and I and Martin are wanting to do this sooner rather than later. So I will just go now, because I'm that sort of person. If it's a fire running, I'm straight out the door. So we need to have some consultation here. So how's the consultation go that gets us to the point quicker rather than later? That's the question I'm trying to get to here.
So that would be a formal consultation under the Local Government Act. We'd have to develop a proposal, we'll have to run it through the Office of the Auditor General and have the
So we don't have the
audited,
budget for that.
and we'd run that consultation over the next few months essentially. But to be clear, the proposal would be changing the purpose of the Disaster Damage Relief Fund, and we would be funding it from there.
Oh, Future Farming Trust have got some cash.
Sorry? Sorry,
Farming Trust have got cash.
what I had outlined was broadly what Leanne has put up there, but it could be preceded by agrees that the decision is significant and instructs staff to set up, investigate setting up and other options for further effective, et cetera, which will include consultation, you know. So that's a shorthand version of what I had in mind, and would be very happy to put as a motion, and would like to speak to it substantively at some point.
Well, I'm happy to have that seconded on that basis.
You mean he's going to change it? He's going to say is significant.
It is significant, and therefore we're instructing staff to investigate setting up this unit and other options for further effective climate change initiatives through the long-term plan, which will include consultation with the community. And so there is.
They're on different pages.
Well, the page that I'm on is very close to that page, where we leverage off the consultation we've just signed off on, and we build this into as a discrete topic for informal consultation in the lead up, so we don't have to have a separate SCP prior to the long-term plan, much as I'd like to. That's what I think.
But it's not on the timetable that Councillor Barker is.
I know
which
that.
is faster, right?
But I'm just saying what I've suggested is quite like what Leanne has written up as 3.
Yes, understand that.
He's on the slow track.
He's on the slow track.
Can I ask James, what would be the time difference, how many months difference, if we went with having to consult to change the Disaster Relief Fund versus the consultation through the LTP and 1st of July? You know, do we have some time frames of the time difference?
So I'm going to guess and say 6 to 8 months.
The difference, okay.
And the reason I'm guessing is we need to go and do a little bit of planning work. We'll need to contact the Office of the Auditor General and find out their capacity, because we can't dial up an audit, and obviously it's end of year for them, and they'll be entirely occupied over the next couple of months, so we'll need to weave it into their work program.
Would the mayors be ready for an invitation by then?
Couldn't speak on their behalf.
Nor could I.
Or alternatively, we could just go and do it ourselves, couldn't we?
Yeah, that's right. Invited.
Yes, invite anyone that wants to get on the WACC. And
Right, by invitation.
I was just going to raise the governance aspect of that. Just needs a little bit of clarification that this council and these councillors in this room are accountable for obviously those funds, and we can't outsource that to others. So while we could welcome their involvement in an advisory capacity, ultimately the governance of this entity and the accountabilities rest with this council. It's different under civil defence to the extent that we have a statutory framework, but actually this council is still responsible for the civil defence rates and expenditure.
That's where I got the idea from. We do it, they part of it, gives it wider credibility and support. I thought it was actually watching the civil defence thing, rather, I thought this works really well. Never seen it work better.
So, are you prepared to make it it's significant? Take out not.
Sorry? Well, I'm facing, I just sense that I'm a minority of one here on this. Which which is not unusual for me. But
You might scrape through another.
Doesn't mean you're wrong.
Sorry?
No,
You might scrape through.
you're right, but we're constrained. You're right,
Well,
though.
I'll do that anyway. So I'm now looking for my best alternative is how to get this thing through quicker. And James is saying that if we put it through the long-term plan for the next round, we could have this decision done by July next year and go live after that.
Yeah.
12 months' time. Well, let's run it that way then.
Right, if you win the vote. First you need to second it, and then you need to win the vote.
I would second that.
Sorry?
I would second that. If you took the word not out of 2 and you
Yep.
had roughly 3, I
Yep.
would second it.
Okay.
Be or not to be? Roughly 3.
Right, we are.
So for what we got up, we've got not out, get
So
not
take
out.
that out.
Just to
Now, James, can you just,
Can't
can you live with this?
It's number 5 you need, because that second bit starts to contradict it.
Yes, it is.
It's recommendation 5 is,
Yep, no.
if councillor Barker agrees that it is significant, yeah, no, the wording's
What it
got to
says
be.
now. Agrees
No.
it is significant.
No, that bit,
This
without
one?
conferring. There
also
you go,
laid
it's
other
different.
opinions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Reluctantly accepts.
So I just want to be clear whether or not you are considering this in the long-term plan.
Well, can I suggest, James, that where it says, which will include consultation with the community as part of informal pre-long-term plan consultation?
So we can certainly add it into the pre-consultation program.
Yep.
Easily. Put that in.
No, in 3, Dan. Go down to the end of 3, which will include consultation with the community as part of pre-long-term plan informal consultation. Informal. Or whatever.
Does that have any standing?
Well, we're doing it. We're going to be doing that. So it is a thing.
Yeah, it is.
Let's scroll down again to Leanne. Let's just keep going down there. Regions to view catalysts for encouraging the regions into his house. All right, keep going. That's okay. Keep rolling down. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. If you're going to do that, then you take the regional disaster fund out of it.
Yeah.
Take that out. Don't need that.
So this one?
Yeah.
Okay, so then it becomes,
You're missing some material from the original.
Yeah, a lot.
Well, do we need to get into all of that for?
As long as we've got, so we're looking at establishing a unit,
Yeah.
which do that, it's focused
What unit?
purely on climate change, climate change
Application.
Yes.
mitigation. It has to be about leading the community,
The prescriptive stuff, Scott.
yeah.
put that,
Can we have mitigation in the red, please,
Mitigation, yes, please.
instead of just climate change?
Climate change mitigation.
It is picked up in the next para
Yeah, but
in
I'm
terms of
saying,
the purpose.
I'm just
It's to
thinking that
reduce and mitigate their greenhouse gas emissions, but that's fine.
the bit about the remit is where it starts possibly foreclosing. This is why I wanted to speak to it, because I've actually almost Ubered in my head, Ubered Rick's idea. In other words, this directorate could do more than that.
Oh, it could do, yeah.
Yeah. I'm happy to share those sorts of things stage.
Okay,
We should put
righto,
the
come
motion.
on.
Do we,
It's nearly 3 o'clock.
this is kick the can down the road
Yeah.
anyway, so I'm happy to move that.
I'll
And,
second it.
Martin's happened to second. Do you wish to speak further?
I've said enough, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. Martin, do you wish to speak, or have you said
Well, if
enough
I
as
could,
well?
no, I haven't actually, I'm afraid, but I will be reasonably brief. I'm excited about this, and I was when I first heard Councillor Barker suggest the motion with that civil defence response in mind. And I was until Roger Marker stopped me in my tracks at the EICC meeting with the point that we need to be sure this is going to be effective. And so I've thought long and hard, why would this be more effective than what we've already got in the paper and all of the things that we're already doing, the strategic plan with all of the infusion of climate change? And I believe it would be effective because it would be independent, it would be its own part of the council structure. We've got the corporate structure here, but there isn't anyone who's looking at it through the side
just through the lens of what are asset group doing, what are policy and planning doing, what are corporates doing, you know, as an organisation, and in terms of what they're rolling out for the region, with that climate change lens in mind. It would be effective because it would be resourced. It would be effective because it would be focused. That's all it's doing. It would be effective because it would be connected to the territorial authorities, and I think it would be effective because it could connect with Wellington in the same way that our joint working group for coastal erosion has raised, you know, national and international attention. We'd be doing something demonstrably different. I've shared with you my vision that we design and plan for a world in which people can live productive lives in a zero carbon economy. And I think a directorate of this kind, a unit of this kind, rather like the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, if you like, sitting looking at us as an organisation and all of our decision making through that lens, would help us better deliver that dream or that vision. So it could take the emissions reduction plans coming out of government under the Zero Carbon Act and ensure that what we're doing in all our decision making just focused on that issue is most likely to deliver that. It could showcase to central government how things could be done as a model for other regions. So I think it would be effective, but I do think the preliminary step of the consultation survey that we've already got designed will give us a better indicator of whether this is something the region's got an appetite for and is willing to pay for. And if we build it into the pre-consultation phase, we can road test the proposition, flesh out the detail, flesh out the remit. If there were 3 staff, for example, there might be one that's looking at our policies, our planning policies, our water allocation, our urban design, our infrastructure, all that sort of stuff. There might be one person that's looking at business in the community and what they're doing and driving around, like you said last time, Councillor Barker, and telling people what their opportunities to do better. There might be one person that's interfacing with the territorial authorities and with Wellington. So it doesn't have to be 3, but if there were 3, that's how it could be. But we leave it reasonably open and broad as to the governance structure. Might end up just being us. We invite others. So I'm supporting it for that reason, because we've got to do something dramatically and demonstrably different. For the reasons that I've just shared, I think that we could add value to the enormous amount of activity that's already going on through this unit.
Thank you, Martin. Neil, you have to say something?
Yeah, well, I do want to speak, Mr. Chair, and I do want to congratulate Councillor Barker for pursuing this dog at a bone, and, because that's what it needs.
Yeah.
The thing that strikes me in this, and I've got every sympathy for the staff involved, particularly James, trying to do as much as he possibly can. He gets climate change, he understands it, he knows the urgency, but he can only work with the resources that we've got in front of him. And quite frankly, when you assemble the issues there, it's clear we are making a significant effort in this direction. But like Councillor Barker and like Councillor Williams, it's not enough. It's simply not enough. And this is where we need to introduce even more urgency. We need, one, to make sure our organisation is the flagship that is driving through this region and driving the whole debate. That's to me, that's the most fundamental thing we can do. I'm really concerned, and that's why I'm pessimistic, Mr. Chair, that the leaders of our respective authorities, local authorities, do have and share that same sense of urgency, and I know they don't. And some, in fact, are not even prepared to acknowledge climate change around the corner. And the reality of it is it's not it's not a point in time where we're going to fall over the cliff. It doesn't work like that. How it's working is a landmine. It's like walking across a landmine, and the landmine's getting closer and closer together. So this year it's drought. Next month it'll be storm and wet weather. A year after it'll be more erosion on the coastline, etc. So that's what it looks like. And by 2030, There'll be landmines going off all over the shop. You can be assured of that. So our job is to at least try and part them a little, create some pathways and make real traction. I'm enthusiastic about going to the public on this. I'd much rather go earlier than the long-term plan timeframe. I think we ought to go as a standalone consultation so that in fact we can elevate the issue in everyone's mind and keep this thing on the boil. So, Mr. Chair, happy to support this, but it's the urgency that I'm really seeking to have expressed throughout this exercise.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Anyway, then Sheriff.
Yeah, I just want to thank Councillor Barker also for bringing this to our attention, giving it more visibility, because that's what it has done. It's got us debating about it. It's got us being passionate about it. And actually, most of the presentations we've had today is around climate change and mitigation and how we can do better. So I think a coordinated effort, it is our role to do that in this space. And that's why I think this group is absolutely necessary for our future. We do it with Three Waters, we do it for coastal hazards. This just means we give it more visibility, more energy and resourcing. I know we're constrained and we're doing all we can, and it's such a shame that we declared an emergency at a time where we had no funding to do anything about it. So now's our time, and I'd like to see actually with our long-term pre-consultation that we separate climate change out as something very significant and not get it entangled in all the other works and things we do. Okay, so I'm really passionate about this, but I know that the stress it has on our staff, so it's always a balancing act. Okay? But I am looking forward to what we can get out of this group. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Sheriff.
Yeah. Well, you know my view on this.
No, we don't. We're about to hear it. We're to speak yet. Get on the balcony.
Okay.
Get on the balcony.
I'd rather get on my bike and actually do something, you know? Okay. How do I said it? You know, all day long we've actually been peddling this message. And as we say in East Pier, I'll bring you back to East Pier, you know, the glasses we're all wearing are climate change. And we're all well aware. And through the work that Rebecca and her team are going to do, and Drew, this will become very visual. However, what you're proposing here, even if we would start today, in 10 years' time, we'll have no visibility of actually what we have achieved, apart from 3 people, maybe electric cars, and we've got a big hole in our budget, okay? So the rates, just a question, 2.5%. So next year, we'll be looking at an extra 2.5%, just because of what we actually are going to vote on today. It's going to be quite tough, because we're not going to be it won't be another zero rate plus 2.5. It actually will be playing catch up plus 2.5. It will be quite tough. 2005, I had an opportunity to go to Kiribati. I had no reason to be there, but I was invited to go there. And somebody said to me, "You better go, Sheriff. You know, I know you haven't got any work there to do, but come on, jump on the Hercules so you can come along." So no, I have got no business there. Yeah, but in 15, 20 years' time, it won't be there. All these 10,000 people from Kiribati will be here in New Zealand. So it's the last time you can be there. Actually, the landmass of Kiribati has increased. Okay, all those people are still there, and we're still employing them. And I actually work with Kiribati people, or Ni Kiribati, however you want to call them, and they actually don't see there as an issue. Their Prime Minister, Prime Minister Tong, thought there was an issue. And he got a lot of money out of it from the United Nations, because he actually peddled this particular message. He's not there anymore. But I know what his bank account looks like. It looks pretty healthy.
It isn't members.
So there you go. So 15 years ago, 2005, they said Kiribati would no longer exist around about this time. And where is it now? Still there and healthy, and everybody's still there, okay? They're not as healthy as people, unfortunately, but that's other reasons. So are we just doing this to be seen? So they were actually seen as a regional council, that we actually at the forefront? I'm not having it, you know, and neither are the people that I meet in the street. They're telling me, stop it. You know, we've got COVID-19. We've got some serious issues economically. That's where we need to put our finger right now. And if we actually have the luxury to be able to do this, great. I will be all for it, you know. I live in a straw home. You know, I ride my electric bike whenever I can. I don't have an electric stove in my house. So I'm actually not on that balcony. I'm actually doing it, okay? I've made a big investment in a voltaic system on my pack house. So I actually can be from an electricity point of view, neutral. So I make that investment so I don't have to have any power coming down my line if I can help it, okay? So I'm actually walking the parade. But this here is just, if I listen to what you guys are saying, you're making grandiose statements of things that are going to happen, and I've seen it with Kiribati and Tuvalu, it didn't happen. And you can't tell me now that in 10 years' time, we'll actually have landmines going off every single year. So you know my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Will?
Sorry, we're not a tag team down here, but...
You guys sit somewhere else over there with the backbenches, will you?
Look, I'll start off with positives, and well done to Councillor Barker for bringing up something he's so passionate about. I just don't agree with I guess the method. What I will say is that I'm very glad if we go with this that we are going to consult the public. I certainly would have struggled to sleep tonight if we forged ahead without, I guess, respecting our ratepayers and their views. So on my Facebook page, I guess I've done my own consultation. I've got approximately 50 responses there of that all say, bar one, all say no to this. So yeah, look, what did we get? 90 odd in submissions in the annual plan. So, you know, that doesn't seem too far off in terms of a response. I just struggle to see how this is going to be effective, and you know, it does, listening to everyone, sounds like we are forging ahead with this, but just on such little detail, such a, you know, I agree, it's very much a significant decision. To me, there's just not enough detail there, and yeah, I mean, you know, what are the three people actually going to do? How is this going to be effective? I can't see any of that from in the paper. If we go to farmers, and no doubt, you know, they'll be on the list of people that are approached in this work stream. You know, what can farmers do? They can plant trees. You know, as we know, there's plenty of pine trees getting planted around here. They can plant erodible hillsides. We're doing, you know, what our resources allow in terms of poplars coming out of the nursery. We can plant riparian strips and native plants. We're doing, you know, what we can source there already. We can be more productive around growing our animals quicker. That's, you know, that's been happening in the sheep and beef sector for over 30 years now. So I guess, you know, what else can farmers do? And like my green friend beside me here, I live in an off-the-grid house, so I guess I've got first-hand knowledge at perhaps at what Councillor Barker's expecting us all to route to go down here. It's got a shed full of batteries that, you know, would fill in this hole in here. They're currently 9 years old, and at the end of their lifespan, they all need to be chucked out. Probably got to spend 25 grand to start again with newer technology that might last a bit longer, but nonetheless, that's part of the system. When the sun doesn't shine, we have to go down and start up a diesel generator because the sun doesn't shine all the time. We collect rainwater with a solar pump that then pumps it up. The sun's not shining at the same time as it's raining, so, you know, we're probably collecting 10% of the water that we could. So a lot of stuff sounds good in practice, but I guess until you actually get in amongst it and find that it's very expensive, doesn't actually always work that well, and it's consistently breaks down, and real hard to find people that know about it to work on it. So yeah, like I welcome anyone to come down and visit our house at any stage. But yeah, that's all I'll say. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, I think I'm probably in the same lines as Will and Jeremy on this, in that I think the paper on the face that Leon's put up is telling me that the staff went through a lot of work to put all that in place, so thanks for that information. And it's, yeah, the one about the using the having no money. This would sound like a pretty clear signal. There's no money for it. But then again, I think that when you made the statement of a climate crisis, it should have immediately been adopted and ingrained into the organisation as you would with your health and safety meetings and your work tool shed meetings. Just as how you deal with your electrical wires all over the place, you deal with every job that the staff do, and this could be led by the managers, is that it has to show clear support, clear direction for how whatever plan they're working on is also going to assist with the climate change or crisis, so that the staff the work they're already doing is being guided towards climate crisis in the everyday job anyway. So it shouldn't need a specific direction and a couple of more FTEs. Although I do agree that looking at it in the wider community, that does. But yeah, I also agree with the point that you're doing the hazard strategies, so you're doing all the other tree planting and that purely for this purpose. So I think Council is doing a good job. And I come back to Craig's point about we should be making sure we're pretty squeaky clean first, and it might be prudent to do this year of self-auditing and checking about how each department's contributing to the crisis, to averting the crisis. And then maybe after next year, look at putting in a specific team. But at this point, I probably think it is a bloody good idea for someone to do it sooner or later, but maybe later rather than sooner.
Hey Charlie, I think we've all had a say here. Rick, I think you are going to give the opportunity to wind it up.
Oh, could I thank you? Can I just thank everybody for the discussion? It's been really quite revealing, and I think on occasions you do need to have a healthy debate, strong opinions, and get into it. Otherwise, there's no point. We're not here to shuffle paper, and I think this has been one of those. Could I just say that we did, as a council, declare a climate emergency, and we had a number of young people come here and see us. They challenged us, what are you doing? What are you doing? And until recently, I'd have to say the answer was very little, actually, that reflected the actions of an emergency. Emergency describes urgency. And the Hawke's Bay Regional Council actually is in a very luxurious place. It can argue, hand on heart, tomorrow that we are carbon neutral. It does. We've got a whole pile of trees in the ground. It's positive action. Yeah, we can argue we are actually in a... But that's not because of our own actions in our own self, it's because of the position we're in. So we can argue that, but it doesn't address the broader picture, actually. The broader picture is that climate gases are going up. We do have a problem globally where people, believe it or not, glaciers are melting. We now are being told that within a short period of time, polar bears will be disappeared from the planet, because the means of hunting for food will have gone. In the summer months, there will be no ice floes in the Arctic area, and polar bears will have gone. And that will happen before all of us here around this table have passed on ourselves. Within our time, they will go. Glaciers are melting at a much faster rate than we've ever seen, phenomenal rate. So it's happening whether we like it or not, and you can ignore it if you choose to, but the climate change is not going to ignore that. As to acting and doing things, then sometimes you have to do things which are unpopular. And I'll give you a very good example. If Helen Clark had a weight of popularity to change the rules on smoking, it would never have happened. Change the rules on smoking in bars and restaurants, you would have thought New Zealanders' throats were being cut at the time, the outrage about it. But the moment it had been done, who ever thought of going back to put a bill into House to enable smoking again in bars and restaurants? No one. So it was the action was taken because it was right, and I think this is another one of those too. Yes, the proposal can be belittled because what are the three people going to do, where they're going to go, etc. We can do all of that. The fact is we need an independent voice to challenge what we do as a council, to challenge what businesses do, to help and assist. And if we don't have specific resources to do something, nothing's going to happen. So that's my view. I accept the wisdom of the council's decision that it's going to put it to the long-term plan. We're going to have a discussion about it. I think it's going to be a very intense discussion, and I welcome it slower than I'd have liked, but I have to accept that. That's the will of council. And I just want to thank you all for your contribution to this discussion. I appreciate the work of the staff and the thoughts and every other thing. And well, may we have a good debate about it, because we need to discuss this, if nothing else. So happy with the outcome, Chair.
Okay, so we're going to put it, it's the amended version, of course, which is up there now in front of you. So all those, we're going to go straight to division, because I think it's important. Yep. It's important. So all those in favour, raise their hand. Oh, she was a close one.
Sorry, keep them up, please.
And against? 5 4, the old
Gosh, the
5
old 5
the
4,
old
eh?
5 4. The motion is carried. Thank you. Now, we were going to stop at 3, but we've got the Maori Committee yet to go to before. And I think I can see that our cup of tea is ready, but I think we'll take the Maori Committee, report on the Maori Committee now. And would one of the co-chairs just like to report on the Maori Committee?
If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, we'd like the
Whakarai. Okay.
Just through the chair, it's a straightforward paper, it's a short paper. Please take it as read. Any questions? You have people here who can respond.
Are there any questions for the two co-chairs or Petty? If there are none, do we have a mover to Rick will move? And
Second up.
actually, were you at the meeting, Rick?
I still move the report.
Okay. We'll have you second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. So that is the end of our, yes, because we're not going to take the report from councillors because there were none really.
Yep.
So,
Have we done the
we haven't, I think we'll, yes we have. I think what we're going to do is we're going to stop and have a quick cup of tea because it is ready, and then we'll come back and move into public excluded, and then we'll get on to our coastal havens workshop. So stop for 10 minutes.
We're doing pretty well.
No, we did terrible that last one. It took an hour.
Yeah.
It was